Hi, this is Yvon Prehn, and this is a training video that will show you how to effectively create and use church connection cards. Wonderful little tools to help you connect with visitors and pastor your people. Now, why these are so important. Today, when tragedy happens, when people experience emotional hardships, they still come to church. Even though we have a very secular society, people will still go to church. But how do we know they're there? How can we connect with a visitor? Not only with visitors, but how can we find out about the needs of our own people? Our people come every Sunday, and if you have a church that's over 10 people in size, you can't talk to every single one every day, but they come with needs, prayer requests. How do we find out about those things? How can we be the church? How can we physically meet people's needs? How can we feed the hungry and clothe those who need it and provide shelter? How can we do all of these things? It is vitally important that we have a way to make a connection with people, and connection cards can do that. They are so much more than paperwork. I know in a lot of churches, sadly, and I really think this is the enemy working against us, we just think, oh, those connection cards, got to enter them into the database, and what a pain in the neck. But they're not that. They are an extraordinary length. Each filled out card represents a person. And people don't fill out those cards just for the fun of it. It represents their questions, maybe about the faith or the church, or maybe they're sort of asking, will these people really help me? They say all this great stuff from the pulpit, but do they mean it? It oftentimes represents their fears. People will say things on a card that they would never have the courage to say in person. The same with their pain. My husband and I have been in ministry for many, many, many years, and we have done what I'm sharing with you. This is one of the most personal of many of the webinars I do, because I have seen firsthand the extraordinary difference that these things can make, and the pain and the fear that people will share with you, the things that they will say on these little cards. It is just astounding. And also the hope. People sometimes are almost pleading with you, answer me, pay attention to me, connect with me. Their importance really cannot be overstated. And so I would just really pray that all of you, as you watch this, would take it very, very seriously and commit to do whatever it takes to make this ministry really successful in your church. Now, I'm going to give you a lot of very specific, concrete training in this webinar. But everything that I go into, needless to say, I can't go into the depth. I don't have time to show you all of the examples that I would like to. I may try to do some additional videos, but I want this one to come in, under half an hour, hopefully, because I know people's patience isn't everlasting. But I do have a book that I've written on this that goes into very great detail of all the different things on it. And at the end of the webinar, I'll tell you how you get it. You can download it immediately from my website. Really easy to get, very cheap, $8.95. So it's not that big a deal. So I'm just telling you now, so that if you're a little frustrated on some of the things I go over, you will know that there is quite a bit more detail available for you. Now, first of all, I'd like to talk about what doesn't work, because I think every church really wants to connect with visitors, and they think that they might be doing something that ought to work, but it really isn't. And let me just say, not only from my own experience, but from teaching seminars for over 20 years all over North America, talking to thousands of people in churches, I have lots of experience in all of these things. So, number one that does not work are the little attendance booklets that you pass down the row and back and forth. Now, those may have, some churches call them friendship pads. Those may have worked 20, 30 years ago when we were in a much safer and kinder society. But today, with people's privacy concerns, to ask, for example, a single woman who visits your church to write down her name, her address, her phone number, and her email and pass it down a row of strangers. I mean, goodness gracious, people just won't do that. People don't feel safe. It's just really not a good idea, and I really I do not recommend that. You will not get the response you need, nor will people really pour out their hearts and prayer requests and things like that for something that just everybody can look at. Another thing that doesn't work out are cards in the pews. Now, I have no idea why these don't work. I know why the pads don't, but church after church, person after person has told me if they decided, because they wanted to make their bulletin tidier or something like that, to put the cards in the pews, all of a sudden nobody fills them out. I don't know what that is, but that's just human nature. Trust me, that does not work. If you do that, you aren't getting a good attendance, and if you're changing or whatever, just don't even think about it. It just doesn't work. Another thing that really doesn't work to connect with visitors are the visitor packets at the visitor center. Real unchurched visitors, chances are, will not go pick them up. Now, your church hoppers will. They want to check you out to see if you're theologically sound or not. So they'll go get them. They know the church drill. But really, people that are maybe just checking out a church and are kind of scared, they won't go back there. And also, too, I visited a lot of churches. My husband and I studied church planting for a while, and we were visiting all sorts of different churches and all. And I have never seen a visitor center that had maybe at the most more than 2 or 3 people. Well, if you have a large church and you really expect every visitor to go to the visitor center, do you think they're going to stand in line? I mean, when you really think through the practical implications of this, it just doesn't work. Now, visitor packets are not bad in and of themselves, but I would put them in a place where people can pick them up, just, maybe in a basket or a rack, in your lobby, whatever, but don't make them have to go somewhere and ask somebody for them. Another thing that some churches can make this work, but it can be sort of touch and go, is a tear off part of a bulletin. If you have everybody tear them off at the same time, that can work. But to ask just visitors to do that, they don't probably want to be the one person sitting in a quiet sanctuary ripping up paper. So that doesn't always work very well. And then the other thing is just assuming that everybody knows what they ought to do with the cards, and so you don't mention it. These things don't work. And you want to connect with visitors, so if you're doing any of these things, in some ways I'd say just sort of don't bother. But there is a way to get people to fill them out, and this really does work. Now, first of all, I recommend that you have pre-done cards done up. I realize this isn't on the slide here, forgive me, but you have pre-done cards done up on lightweight cardstock and that they are in people's bulletins. Then here's what you do. The pastor or worship leader gets up and says, now would everybody take out their visitor card or connection card or whatever you want to call it? Everybody takes them out. And then pastor says, we are so excited that you're here today, and we really want to hear about you. You might look at this as your feedback card. In fact, some churches even call them a feedback card, and just say, we want to know, is there a question that you have about the church? Can we pray for you in any way? Is there something you want to share with us? We really, really want to know. Now, I'm going to fill out my prayer request for the week, and you take a minute and fill yours out. This is absolutely essential. But I also warn you that this is the hardest thing you will do in the entire church service. Everything inside you will scream, you can't take time to do this. You can't take time to do this. If you time it, 60 seconds is all it will take. It will seem like an eternity, but play a few bars of music and you fill out a card. And actually, I would really fill it out. Write your name and a prayer request, whatever, so you can really time it. And people, because they looking around, everybody else is doing it, they'll fill theirs out. And then say to folks, now, you can hold on to them. At the end of the service, we're going to take them up with the offering. But we really want to know what you're thinking, what we can pray for. Then if you go to after this sermon, pastor stands up again and says, you've all, or worship leader, whatever, you've heard this sermon today. Now take just a minute, and if you have a question, if you've made a decision today, we want to know about it. We're going to be passing around the offering plate in just a few minutes, and if you're a visitor, we don't want any money from you. The only thing we want from you is that connection card. And again, a little bit of music, you give people a chance to fill them out. And I would not sing a song then, because people will stand up to sing, they won't fill out their cards. A lot of these logistics are not little, they're really a big deal. But you take up your offering, and you will be astounded at the response you will get. Now, beware, because every Sunday it will be very, very hard to do. Every Sunday you will not want to pause and take the time to do it, but you have the time. Honestly, like I said, 60 seconds, 2 minutes, under 5 at the most. But this will make the connection with people. They will fill out the cards. Now, once you get them, this is really, really important, because you don't just shove them on your desk and get around to them whenever. After thinking about this for a long time, and like I said, working with lots of churches that do it, I really recommend what I call a triage of the cards. Now, let me tell you a little bit of the history of triage, and then in the next slide, I'll show you how this applies to the cards. During times of war or emergencies or whatever, the medical teams always do what's called a triage. They tag people, literally tag people a lot of times, with red, yellow, or green. Red means they need immediate intervention or they will die. Having trouble breathing, bleeding profusely, whatever, they have to be attended to immediately. Yellow means they're hurt pretty badly, but kind of keep an eye on them, get to them as soon as you can. Green, this is kind of the walking wounded. You can patch them up a little bit, send them on their way, and have them see a doctor within a week or so. They'll be okay, though, if they don't get an immediate response, but yet they still do need a response. Now, how this applies in the church. And by the way, jumping down to the very last line here, you've got to be prepared in advance. Don't even start a real connection card ministry if you're not. Because when you give out those cards and you make a big deal out of filling them out and collecting them, people expect a response. And you can break hearts. You really can. From a pastoral perspective, I've seen this happen where when people were not followed up and they spilled out a huge need or something like this, the damage is almost irreparable. So please don't even begin unless you have these things in place. And in my book, I go into literally checklists and things like this on what you need to have in place in the church office. But I strongly recommend that if you do this, you have someone immediately screen the cards. If you're serious about this and you're a church of any size at all, you will get people who will say, I'm leaving here and I'm going to go kill myself. Or they'll say, my husband kicked me out of the house. Or, I was beat up one time too many and I'm on the streets tonight. You will get things like that. And you can't wait. People are in tremendous need. Now, I'm not saying that the primary church secretary should do this or the pastor or whatever, but in every church you have retired people, you have pastoral teams, you have people that could deal with it immediately. You count the money right away. So, let's count where people are. Have, a couple of people that goes through them. And you won't have something really critical every week, but there will be those key emergencies that, if someone say, they were really beat up and they went to the church and they don't have any place to stay, if you can call them and say, we've got a place for you to stay tonight. And we want you to know that Jesus loves you. You'll change their life. Now we have the yellow cards. These are the ones that I really feel that you have to respond within 1 week. These are areas that where somebody says, I need prayer, or I need to find out about something, or they have a physical need that's maybe not really pressing, but you can help them out with some stuff. Also, a very important area in this one is volunteer requests. When you ask people to volunteer, and they do, don't ignore them. I've heard person after person has come up to me and said, my church makes such a big deal that they need people for this or that activity, but I can't tell you how many times I volunteered, and then I never hear back from anybody. And, I've just quit volunteering because it doesn't seem like they're paying any attention. So we need to respond to those kinds of things. These are the sorts of things also where you should have things in the church office. For example, if you have on your church bulletin, do you want information about the children's ministry, men's, women's, etc., you better have information that you can either copy and email right away, send as a brochure, whatever it is. Don't ask people if they want information and then you don't have any of it. And two, be really careful of just passing it on to somebody else in the church. Now, I would do that if there are other people that are responsible, but I would send them some tangible piece first. And then you need to follow up and make sure that the different ministries do respond. If someone, for example, in whatever ministry just doesn't respond, you might just say, Mary, we know that you have been asking people to volunteer for the hospitality ministry, and we've gotten quite a few requests or responses where people want to do that, but then we hear that you don't get back to them. Now, can we do something in the church office? Or, if you don't have time to do that, we really can't put your request in anymore. Because you see, it just isn't kind to people. So with these folks, you want to have the materials, respond within 1 week. If you can't do that, do not ask for a response in that area. And then green, these are the kind of clerical things, the database stuff, the address changes, the whatever. But do these as soon as possible. Don't let them pile up. If you notice, for example, you're taking roll for people. A lot of people do this in their church just to see who else is attending. And if you do that and you see that maybe somebody hasn't been there for 3 or 4 weeks, if you don't catch that until the 4th or 5th week, maybe there's been some tragedy in the family and nobody was just able to call the church office. So even what we consider just bookkeeping can signal a very significant change in someone's life. And you're the shepherd. Remember, Jesus went after the one little sheepy, so you got to keep track of those little sheepies. Now, you can also use these as prayer cards, and these are a very important way to connect with your people on an ongoing basis. When we are leading a group, either in the church overall or in a Sunday school class, small group, some sort of adult ministry, we don't have time. Once a class gets over maybe 5 people, and hopefully your ministries are growing, to contact every single person on Sunday, well, how'd your week go, and can I pray for you? We don't have time to do this. And so this becomes a wonderful pastoral tool. You can use this in all kinds of ministries, and my husband and I have used it in Bible studies and small groups and single adult ministries, and I can't tell you how many different ministries, and this has always just been extraordinarily powerful, where we put just as much emphasis on it as we would recommend in an overall church service. And it's amazing what happens. Now, where this works so well for prayer requests is, again, if your church is any size at all, there's really no room in the bulletin to list all the prayer requests. And people can't get really personal about them. In a lot of churches that I visited, they have a listing of who's sick and out of work. And nowadays it's also deployed overseas. So sick, out of work, deployed overseas. And I had somebody come up to me in one of my seminars one time and say, well, if I'm not either sick, out of work, or deployed overseas, I guess my church isn't interested in praying for me. Well, we know that's not true, but this gives people something like this a time to really share their prayer requests. Now, also, too, if you get a lot of prayer requests back, you really don't have time to pray for everybody in the staff meeting. You might wish you could, and maybe you can divvy them up or whatever. But a prayer team where you have a group of people that really covenant to pray for people in the church and sign a confidentiality thing, that can be really, really useful. So different ways that you can deal with them once you get them, but they're very important. Now, this is just actually a facsimile of a little card that my husband and I have used very similar ones in ministry after ministry. Now, you could have it as part of your overall church one, but this is one we use in Sunday school classes, all kinds of things like that. And we have found that this knits together a group more quickly than almost anything. My husband is a huge prayer warrior, and he will literally carry these cards with him all week long and pray for people. And he has a great memory, he'll follow up on them and things like that. And when people know that their pastor is literally carrying their prayer requests with him, it's very powerful. So respond either formally with a little note or interpersonally, whatever, but using prayer cards as a pastoral tool, very, very powerful. Again, a few things, additional notes on what to do and not to do in visitor follow-up. You want to respond quickly. Um, don't wait weeks to do that. Again, going through and seeing, you know when you read the cards whether somebody's really desperate or not, and respond very quickly, and don't lie. You might think, what do you mean don't lie? We wouldn't lie. We're a church. Well, let me tell you about an experience my husband and I had. We were studying church planting in a state that I shall not mention right now, and we took a preliminary trip. Prior to spending a number of months in this state, we visited a church. We got back home and we got a letter from the church. And it said, "Oh, we're so glad you visited our church last Sunday. It was great to talk to you, and so wonderful to have you here. And we really hope that you come back next week. And we're and on and on and on." Well, there were a couple of things that really bugged me about it. First of all, we did not meet the leadership of that church. It was a really big church, and the pastor sort of disappeared somewhere after the service was over. He didn't shake hands or anything like that. So I knew, and it was signed. Of course, a phony signature, but signed by theoretically the pastor. And, he didn't meet us. So don't say you met somebody when you didn't meet somebody. And then, two, they were saying, so glad, I don't know, something, but they obviously did not take the time to notice that we were outside of the state, because the whole thing was written to someone who lived in that town. Now, somebody had to look at it because they mailed it to us and we got it back in California. So, you see, needless to say, we weren't really interested in going to that church anymore when we went back to that city. So, read over the stuff you send out. Um, don't say things you don't mean and that aren't true, and don't talk to somebody as if they live there if you're mailing it out of state. Now, you can turn that into an absolutely wonderful thing and say, well, we can see by your note, if you make it really specific, that you're from out of state. We don't know whether you were visiting on vacation or thinking about relocating here. But if you move out here, we just love to have you come to the church on a regular basis. We probably didn't get a chance to talk to you personally, but our church is full of wonderful folks, and we'd really like for you to come back. In my book, I have some specific things that you can say, but I think you get the idea. Just be real, be human. Don't be phony. And include various ministry materials. If the people check that they have little kids, send them a brochure on the children's ministry. If they said they're single, send them something about that. All of these things, what they say to the person is, you actually read what I wrote down. A lot of times you get something and you think, oh, they checked me off that list. And that's not a nice feeling. So be real, be human. The value of tracts. I would put in a gospel tract that tells how to become a Christian in every single thing you sent out. Your different denominations have different ones, but that's really important. You don't have time to explain everything, but if people open up your letter, chances are they will read that. And then invite them to interact. One of the best things, some of you that have taken my seminars have heard me share this story, but I will tell it till the day I die because I think it's just the greatest follow-up I've ever heard of. What this one church did is they sent out a letter to visitors, and in it were two free coupons for lattes, which I think right there says it's a wonderful church. But what it said, along with it, it said, now we're so glad you visited our church on Sunday. We've enclosed 2 free latte coupons for you, and you can use whatever you want to. However, every Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock, our pastor will be down at such and such a coffee shop, and we invite you to come down and have latte with the pastor. And if you do that, you can ask any question you want about the Christian faith. Now, isn't that great? I just absolutely love that. And that would give people a chance to interact with a real human being without feeling like they have to come to church again or, whatever. And so ways like that, where you are a genuine human being who cares about the spiritual concerns about other people, wonderful way to do it. Giving people creative goodies that are location appropriate. All of your locations have something that's fun about them. I'll never forget when I was doing a seminar in Hershey, Pennsylvania, which if you haven't been there, the air just smells like chocolate. It is so wonderful. But a church in that area gave visitors a little mug filled with kisses, and it was their Mugs and Kisses gift for visitors. Now, isn't that cute? Now, my husband thinks it's corny. I thought it was adorable. But you see, that worked out really well for that area. So think of who you are. How can you do something like that for your guests? Little reality check here at the end. A connection card ministry that really works is a tremendous load of work, and it never stops. It never gets easier. But there is a huge, huge, huge return on investment. If you do this, your church will grow. I promise you, it will grow. For a church plant, as far as I'm concerned, there are few things that you can do that will accomplish more. You know, people can go to a whole lot more interesting concerts outside the church. And let's face it, some of us teachers aren't all that great to listen to. And on and on and on. You know, why should people not just sit in front of their television set or, whatever? They can get all that stuff that the church does, but a television set, an outside concert, a football game, or whatever, that's not going to respond to them as a person when they say, I am hurting, I'm lonely, I'm new in town, help me. Your connection cards can do that. They're little things, but they can have a huge, huge impact on your ministry. Also, too, they will really provide pastoral care. Again, I've seen this so much in the different classes my husband and I have held, and ministries that we've done. We're getting ready to start another one, and this is one of the number one things that I'm going to do is the connection cards. You know where your people are at. They'll just write little notes to you. They know that you're praying for them, and wonderful, wonderful pastoral care, and it makes a huge difference in eternity. It gives you a tangible way to respond to the needs of people. These are little things, but they have a huge impact. And just in keeping that in mind, I would like to close with what Jesus said in Matthew 25:34. Before I do this, let me just say, people talk and argue and all this, what's going to happen at the end of the world and prophetic things and all that. And sometimes I think, I don't know why we argue about so much stuff when, boy, he makes it really clear what's going to happen when we meet our God. And here's what he says. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father. Take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go visit you? The king will reply, I tell you the truth. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine. So in review, connection cards, when you do them correctly, and that doesn't mean using the little response pad or having them go to the visitor center and all the things we talked about. When you do them correctly, they provide a way for you to connect with visitors and to pastor your people. You won't know the visitors are even there if they don't tell you. You've got to make that connection. Connection cards will do it. Same with your people. You'll never know their hurts. You'll never know their prayer requests unless they tell you what's going on. Connection cards will help you do that. Then remember also that your response must be immediate and appropriate. Triage your cards. For emergencies, contact people immediately. For any kind of volunteer or ministry responses within the week, and then even clerical things, do them as soon as possible, because sometimes these things will let you know what's going on with your people. And just like the little runner here, endurance is essential for eternal results. A runner trains and works hard, and it's all worth it when they reach the finish line. It's the same for you. You might work for many, many years, decades even, putting together connection cards, getting them out to your people, recording them, responding. It will be hard, difficult, challenging work, but I guarantee you that when you see Jesus face to face, it will all be worth it. May the Lord really bless you as you work on your connection cards. I do have just one more little thing for you, and that is my book on connection cards. It's kind of interesting when I was putting together all of the different materials that I've been trying to get in written form. This was the one that I actually felt that I should do one of the first, and it's what I did. Um, so it's 93 pages. It's available two ways, either downloadable through the website effectivechurchcom.com or through Lulu. Now it's $8.95, same price, either one, except in Lulu you could also get it in print form for $14.95. It just obviously costs a lot more to produce it that way, but either way is fine. Now let me show you. I won't go through the whole book. I'll just show you a few things in it, but I thought a little gallery tour of some of the connection cards on it might be very useful. So let's just look at that real quickly. Okay, here's our book on connection cards. It's an 8.5 by 11 book, and let me just get into it here. You know, the basic stuff and all that. Starting out with a reminder that He is faithful in that which is least, is faithful also in much, and just reminding us just about the importance of little things. The table of contents here, the introduction, what they can do for your church, what not to do. I go into lots of detail on that, how to get the cards turned in. Again, I literally give you a script of how to go through the things you should say, how you should wait, how to get people to respond, and all of that. An overview explaining triage in much more detail. This is something we didn't talk about in the webinar, but I sort of briefly overview church management software and connection cards because that's how you really get them into the system for your church. Follow-up ideas, using them for prayer requests, letting people know that the hard work is ahead, production tips, and then the gallery of examples, which is what I really want to go to. So let's just see if this will let me skip over to 67 here. Okay, the whole section then on production, lots of tips and ideas. Here I just go through some things that some people did. This was a card that was rather interesting. Church did gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous bulletins. Each week, the young man that was in charge actually did an original piece of artwork for the front of their bulletin. Beautiful, beautiful things. And after the seminar, he came up to me and he'd showed me their bulletin. And then he said, you know, I agree so much with what you say about connection cards, but he said, absolutely nobody ever turns them in. He said, we talk about them, we do all this, but he said, we never get one return anytime. And he said, we're so frustrated, we don't know what to do. And I looked down at the bulletin. I'd been looking at it, and then I looked up at him, and I tried so hard not to laugh. I said, you really don't understand what's going on? And he said, no. And as you can see, yeah, this beautiful, beautiful cover. And he told me people loved them, they saved them, all that kind of thing. And this was a bound booklet, saddle stitched. I mean, it was a beautiful thing. Their connection card was the back of this beautiful front cover. So to turn it in, you would have had to tear the booklet apart and then give away this beautiful piece of artwork. And I said, you know, all you have to do is just put that on a separate card, insert it in there. And I said, I guarantee you'll get lots back. And he just went, oh my goodness. So sometimes we just don't even see what we're doing. And I said, that doesn't mean we need to do an ugly bulletin. This one was actually a piece of original artwork of a church in New York. And that's great. And that's wonderful. But they had their card where it was much easier to get to and you didn't destroy the artwork. There's just lots and lots of ways that you can create invitation cards, and I have all sorts of samples. And from the very simple, these are some that we've used in a very simple setting. You can put them 3 up. You can do them postcard size. This is a much more complex one that we used in working with singles, and it worked out really, really well because we really wanted to find out a lot more about people, and so we used something like this. We also, I was always redoing stuff. Here's another one, and then I also using the same idea. I had what I called a count me in card that I would give out to people periodically for getting people to volunteer for things. That worked out really well. Here I started using a privacy statement on there. People see that all the time when you sign up for a website or whatever, and I thought, well, we ought to just go ahead and do that for folks on our connection cards. So I have that done up for you also, and then just a lot of different samples of cards, from simple to more complex. Very nice, clean, clear cards, tear-offs that do work. Um, a lot's going on at this church, and you can see what they've done. Just all the different ways that people can do things. Maybe some guidelines on what you might not want to do, maybe a little too much going on here. How you can use Publisher for them. Um, uh, then I go into software recommendations and things like that. But just wanted to I won't go through all of the rest of it, but just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of what is on the book. It's there for you, and I think I really, really recommend that you get a copy. You have permission from me as the writer, publisher, all of the above. If you purchase a copy, you may make copies of it to pass around to people in your church. Take sections of it out, email it to folks, whatever you want to do. Just use it, create those connection cards, connect with people, and may God have all the glory. Lord bless you as you do your work with connection cards.